Yeah, okay, great. Awesome. Well, everybody, welcome to a very exciting moment for us. We have an incredible man who has had an incredible career to share all kinds of stories, and then another equally incredible man, Luke Yankee, who is very good friends of Larry Fuller, who's actually going to be conducting this interview. So we're honored to have you both here today, you guys, and I'm not going to stand in your way. This is going to be so much fun. And as I said to you, Larry, we have a couple of surprises, a couple people from your past. They're going to pop in and say hello. And when Luke wants to bring those people in, he will. So anyway, have a great time.
Terrific.
I'm sure I will.
I'm sure we will. Yes, indeed. Well, it's such an honor to be here to interview the great Larry Fuller. I mean, this man's resume is absolutely legendary. He's done so many things and worked with so many incredible people. And so, Larry, let's just dive right in. And why don't we start at, I know you were a hoofer in a number of Broadway shows, but when you really started as a choreographer, that was with a little piece called Funny Girl in London, starring some unknown actress named Barbara Streisand. So would that be a good place to start?
Sure, why not? Actually, Funny Girl got me started as a choreographer and then director, actually. When Carol Haney, who was the choreographer, asked me to do it, at that point in my career, I was like 26 or something, and I'd been dancing on Broadway and on television since I was 18. So I was starting to feel like I'm getting to be old I don't want to be a wardrobe person or have a dancing school. So what could I do? And I thought, I could be an assistant choreographer maybe, never even dreaming I'd be a choreographer. And so when Carol asked me to do the show, I asked to be her assistant. And she said, well, you can be my second assistant because I already have one who will not be in the show, and you can be dance captain. So I was in the show, and I was also in charge of taking care of the show once it opened and she was gone. And she unfortunately died of double pneumonia, I believe. She was a really bad diabetic and didn't take care of herself, and dingy. And so I inherited the show, so to speak, and ended up being asked to recreate her work and a little bit of new stuff they asked me to do for the national tour with Marilyn Michaels, and then in London with Barbara. So of course I was thrilled. I'd never been outside the United States, and to go to London's West End, wow. So we got into rehearsals, and I remember one day, Barbara and I were in the rehearsal room alone with the accompanist. We were working on I'm the Greatest Star. And there was a section in there where it built like, I'm gonna live and live now, bum, dun, 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 that one. Anyway, and that went on, she'd make a statement, then there'd be a bump musically. And originally it was staged for her to be up center, and every time the bump came between lines, she'd take a very deliberate step down stage, and of course finish down center for the end of it. So she had wandered away from that during the year she was on Broadway. And so I was trying to get her to do it again, the original. And as we were working on it, she said, well, wait a minute, this is the original. And I said, yes, it is, Barbara. I mean, it's the best version possible for that particular part of the song. It just fits it like a glove. She said, oh, I thought you were going to get me something new. But she did it.
Did she not like that original choreography for that number, or?
She just was 21 and wanted somehow to feel like she was getting something different. I don't know why she didn't want to do that, but she did. There was one scene that took place in the little burlesque kind of theater called Keeney's, where she first supposedly worked. And it was way downstage in one, and it was only on half of the stage. And so the way it was set up was the actors, or actresses as they were called then, had their backs to the audience, sitting at their dressing table looking in the mirror. And she had a hand mirror, or some sort of mirror that was stationary, not a hand mirror. Or maybe, anyway. So at one point during tech rehearsal, she was sitting there and looking in the mirror and looking in the mirror, and she said, "Stop, stop." And they said, "Well, what's the matter?" And she said, "Well, there used to be a light coming over my right shoulder, and it hit that mirror just at a certain place. It's not there anymore." I mean, that's how picayune she was.
Wow,
That's
and
part
super
of,
lighting, clearly.
yeah. Well, we were, of course, in a totally different theater. But I just had to tell that little story because she also had, I remember one day I was watching Garson Kanin stage her and Sidney Chaplin in a scene where they came into her hotel room when she was on tour out of town. And she had two big paper sacks full of groceries. And she, Garson Kanin, who, I'm sorry, but Garson, maybe you were a good playwright, but you couldn't direct traffic. Anyway, he, he just said, "Okay, will you come in and hide the groceries in different places in the room?" Because, you know, actors aren't supposed to have food in their room. So she did all the lines. They got through it okay. Of course, she kept hiding them in strange places. And then he said, "Okay, that's it, fine. Stage management, pack all the props up. We'll do it again." Nothing. That's all he said. So she had to come in and reinvent where she put things. And this went on about 3 times. And I thought, that poor woman, he hasn't given her one bit of help. So when Jerry Robbins came in, we were all so elated because we knew that even if he treated you like he would make the show work if anybody could, and he did. Okay, that's my Barbara. Have we lost each other?
Okay, you know what? I think we lost Luke. He was telling us earlier he was having Wi-Fi problems, so I'm sure he'll work his way back here in a second. These are great stories. Okay, so I'm going to throw a name at you, Larry, and I'd love to hear, because she was really somebody I looked up to and I would love to know so much about, and that's Madeline Khan. Can you tell us your stories about Madeline?
Madeline was a lovely gal. She wasn't mean. She was just paranoid and insecure for some reason. I mean, I remember having seen Madeline Khan when she was a chubby little comedian in the reviews, comedy reviews upstairs at the downstairs and so on in New York. And she happened to be able to sing quite well. And then when she appeared in the Mel Brooks movies, and suddenly she was a sex symbol comedy star, it was like, it was an entire different woman. And so when I heard that she was going to be cast in On the 20th Century, I thought, oh, this will be fun. And she was mainly cast, by the way, I saw Meryl Streep audition for that role, but she had done one Broadway musical. It was a, what you call them, from Germany. Can't think of his name right. It's so famous. Anyway, and it was a musical that was kind of like Guys and Dolls, which I think maybe they had gotten the idea for doing Guys and Dolls. But anyway, that's only my speculation. So I knew she could sing for sure, but she didn't have a high C. And Comden and Green, Betty Comden and Adolph Green, who were writing the score and the lyrics, they wanted somebody that had a high C and who could do comedy, because they saw it as a comic opera. And so they turned her down. And the only thing she'd done at that point that had made her kind of pop was French Lieutenant's Woman. But she did quite a bit after. So they got Madeline. Hello, Luke's back.
Yes, if I could interrupt for 1 second, Larry, I just want to apologize to the audience here. I'm having some technical issues today, so I may suddenly randomly pop on and off. It's not my intention, I promise you. Sorry, Larry, go ahead with Madeline.
Okay, I think I just said Marilyn, I meant Madeline. And she had the comic ability for sure, and she had a high C. So, and she was a name by then. So she got the role. And the first day of rehearsal, I remember I was standing with Cy Coleman and Hal Prince as we were starting the day, and Hal said to Cy, okay, take Madeline in the vocal room and go through her music. And then the same little group gathered again at lunch or after rehearsal, whatever. And Hal said to Cy, well, how did Madeline do? And he said, well, she won't sing a high C. And Hal said, what? I thought that's why we were hiring her, as one of the main reasons. He said, yeah, but she said she can't do that 8 times a week. So what happened was they made a compromise. And I think there were at least 2, maybe 3 numbers that ended with her going way up there. And so they had an alternate ending. If she couldn't hit the C, she'd do a G. And that went on the whole time that we were running. And she was out a lot in Boston, where we went for previews. And because Hal and Betty and Adolph, they were used to doing musicals the old way. You just go out of town, and if something doesn't work, you write another version real quick, you give it to the actor, you say, okay, it goes in tonight. And they'd have to learn the lines and do it. And so she was not liking the way it was being done. She felt insecure. She didn't think that Hal was taking care of her. So she was unhappy. And I remember one day we were rehearsing yet another version. It was that number in this show over and over. Do it again, do something else, called Veronique, where she changes from an awkward young woman in a kind of midi outfit. And in the middle of it, it's an audition scene for Oscar, her director, who she becomes lovers with. Anyway, in the middle of the number, they rip off the midi dress, and she has a Miss Liberté outfit underneath, the French emblem of liberty. The one, she has a torch in one hand and one breast is out and so on. Of course, her breast wasn't out, but it was made to look like maybe it was. And it was very short, the skirt. And so we were rehearsing, and she was just by herself on stage, because I always rehearsed Judy Kay, the understudy, with the group until everything was set. Then I would teach it to Madeline separately, so she didn't have to learn in front of anybody. And then when she knew what she was doing, I'd put her in the number. So we were alone at the Colony Theater in Boston, and she was standing on stage, and I said, okay, this is where the dress goes. And she was standing there kind of not very feminine looking, with on both feet, with the legs played a little bit. And so I said, Madeline, stand on one leg, I don't care which one, and bend the knee next to one knee next to the standing knee. And I said, you know, bevel. And she said, why? And I said, because it'll make your legs look better. And she went, my legs? My legs, what's the matter with my legs? Oh, I knew they shouldn't have put me in this costume. Oh, this is all done. She got herself so worked up so instantly that she walked off the stage, and that was the end of the rehearsal. Now, wow. She did write me a note opening night in New York apologizing for that behavior. But that's just one major example of how paranoid she was. And when Larry, she was on...
I didn't mean to interrupt. I heard a story, but about her that I wanted to, that you and I discussed before. But go ahead with what you were going to say. When she was on, you started to say.
When she was on, she was wonderful, absolutely fabulous. And then there were other performances where you thought, she's lost. She's just kind of wandering the stage. It was weird. And as I said, she was her own worst enemy, but she wasn't mean.
I had heard that, and one of the reasons I heard that the reason she was replaced by Judy Kay, who I'm sure was tremendous in the role, she's such a brilliant talent, but was that, and you and I had discussed this, that I heard a story that, you know, she was so kind of inconsistent because, as you say, being her own worst enemy, that there was a point in time where Hal went to her, Hal Prince, and said, okay, now for this preview, I want you to just take all the stops out. We've got critics in the house, etc. And so she did. And he went to her afterwards and said, my God, Madeline, that was it. That was amazing. And she said, well, you don't want me to do that 8 shows a week. Does that sound like a true story?
Yes, I know that story. I believe it does have roots in truth. I didn't witness that though.
Yeah.
What I did witness was the end of her in the show. We had been running maybe 8 weeks, and then we were to make the cast album the old-fashioned way on the Sunday, on the day off, in one day. And so the whole cast came in except Madeline, and then she came in later. They did all of the big stuff, and Imogene Coca, bless her wonderful heart, and all the other people did their stuff, and John Cullum, he was wonderful in it, and she came in the afternoon. Then they all left, and she was there alone with Cy and the engineers in the sound booth, and she had to do the end of all of the high numbers. I think there were 3, which she had not done when she recorded the body of the number. They saved the high notes for the very, very end.
Wow.
So everybody was gone, and I thought, well, someone from the creative team has to be here besides Cy. So I stayed, and Hal had gone a long time before that. So she went in her little booth, and she sang about 8 bars into the end of the number, and she did all the high notes perfectly. And so Cy called her into the booth and played back and complimented the hell out of her, and justifiably so, but maybe a little over the top because he knew she was insecure. And she said, yes, well, that's very nice, but you know, my throat, you know, I don't know about her. It just feels strained. And then she was out for 10 days.
Wow. Wow.
And that's when they said, don't come back. We'll pay off your contract, and Judy Kay will be put into the role. We never saw her again.
Now, why do you suppose, I've never heard of that. Why do you suppose they chose to have her do all the high notes at the end? That seems like a very strange choice to me.
I don't know. It was up to Cy, and mainly up to Cy, I think, and the engineer. I've never heard of it before.
Yeah, I would think that would be very hard on a singer to do it that way.
Well, you can't just hit the note. You have to sing into it. So she sang like the last phrase of the song and hit the high ending.
Wow. Now, Larry, I'm sure everyone wants to hear about Evita and your experiences on that, and with Patti LuPone. We have not enough room in Zoom to do that. So, anything you want to share about Evita or Hal Prince or Patti LuPone and that whole amazing experience?
Well, we could do more than an hour just on that, but
I'm sure.
Let's see. When Patti auditioned for the role, Hal had already decided he wanted her. It was obvious from his behavior at the final audition, because there were like 5 of them there. And I remember Toby Felshoe was one of them. And of course, Patti LuPone. So she finished her audition, And Hal jumped up, and immediately before Tim Rice or Andrew Lloyd Webber could say a word, well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, there's no decision. She's our Evita. She's so wonderful, blah, blah, blah. And they were all cut like with their mouth open, about to say something, and they slowly closed their mouth. And Patty got the role. And, but Patty, at that point in particular, I think she was about 30 years old at that point. She was an actor who could sing, who just had a really good natural voice, but she wasn't known as a singer. And that role at the time that it was done in New York in '78 was the first time that any high belt musical lady was asked to sing above a D. Mainly, she had to hit an A in the last number in the first act, New Argentina. And it required, of course, a technique that mixed the chest or lower voice with the soprano voice so that it didn't suddenly break, it didn't sound like a soprano. And so it was a difficult thing for her. And we got through all the rehearsals, no particular problems that I can remember. Well, when I first started working with her on Buenos Aires, What's New Buenos Aires, I'm New, I remember that was a number where she first came to Buenos Aires, and she was like a kid at the carnival. And then when she experienced the oligarchs, the aristocrats, who treated her very badly, it changed her whole point of view during the number. And so we were working alone on it, and I would see her trying to get into the acting part before she even knew what the hell she was doing. And it was like watching in her eyes, like a slot machine. And I'd say, Patty, you know, you're trying to play everything all at once. Why don't you just pick one thing, play that? And if you don't like it, then we'll pick another one. But don't try and do everything at the same time. She was so excited that she was trying so hard. And so we got to our opening in Los Angeles. We went out of town to LA, Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, and then San Francisco, Golden Gate. And Sylvie Drake, I think was her name.
Mm-hmm.
Or was it?
Yes. Sylvie Drake, yes, the critic. Mm-hmm.
Yes. She was the critic that year because the male critic, whose name, of course, I can't remember either. I can't remember anybody's name. He was on sabbatical. So Sylvie Drake did the review. She hated Patty, hated her. It was like that John Simon review where he tore Liza Minnelli apart. I mean, not just her acting or her singing, or even a little bit of dancing. She just hated everything. And then we were there 6 weeks, and 2 weeks after the opening, she did another smear article on Patty. And then 2 weeks after that, she did another one. So she had like 3 smear articles about Patty in the LA Times.
Oh, awful.
And it was like the elephant backstage. Nobody talked about it. And so Patty knew that she was in danger of being fired. Because to my knowledge, the writers wanted her replaced. And Hal, of course, stuck up for her. So when we were closing in LA, am I still on?
Yes. Yeah, okay. You're fine.
When we were closing in LA, she came to me and said, Larry, can I please talk to you after our tech in San Francisco? I really need to talk to you. And I said, oh, okay. I forgot to mention that at orchestra read-through, before we did our first preview in LA, she tried singing over the orchestra. That was her vocal inexperience, because you can't sing over those orchestrations. There's too much electronic stuff in them. And she blew her pipes and she was out the first 2 previews in LA. And Terry Klossner, her understudy, was quite good, but not a star. And Patty was. So anyway, we got to San Francisco, we did the tech run, everybody else was gone. We waited to be sure there was nobody in the theater. And she came out and met me on stage. We just sat down on the edge of the stage, a la Barn in a Trunk. And she maybe said, Larry, I want, and totally fell apart, sobbing, crying and sobbing. It's so terrible. I don't know. This role, it's gotten control of me. I am not in control of it. I never know until I get to the end of Act 1 whether or not I'm going to be able to sing it. And then I'm carrying on. And I said, okay, Patty, I'm going to go to Hal. And he, oh, no, don't go to Hal. Oh, no. And I said, well, of course I am. He's not, some god sitting in a marble throne with a big white beard. He's your director. He wants you to be good. He wants to help you. Oh, I don't know. She was so afraid. And so I said, Patty, he will. I know he will. So I went to Hal and I told him what had happened. And within 2 days, they had found a guy in the ensemble. It was a big one. Then it was like 41 adults. In the original company. And then it got pared down on in subsequent tours. But anyway, this guy, David Fossberg, starting with a V, he was a very qualified voice teacher, not just a voice coach, but a technique teacher. And he worked with her every day that there was no matinee or a day off, And by the time she got to New York 6 weeks later, she was singing it, standing on her head, spinning, no problems. And the rest is history.
I should say it is. Incredible. When you're working on a show like that, Larry, did you have any idea? Did you know you were working on a hit, or was it just one of those, okay, well, we'll see where this goes? Or, did you have a pretty good feeling, because there was so much hype around it in London and before it came to New York, and, the concept album and all of that?
Yes. When we were doing it in London, Hal and I had talked through it so many times. He's a wonderful collaborator. And to find things that, because it was what I called a documentary review, telling the story of some real person's life in a series of musical numbers. And we had to make decisions about all the staging practically. It had to be metaphoric or poetic. It had to give you images to help you understand the story, because when anything is sung through, you don't really get all the words. You have to help the audience understand what's going on. So we found different ways of doing that, metaphoric, poetic kind of staging. And when we were in rehearsal, he would check my stuff and say, right there in that part, I'm not sure what you mean. Can you make that clearer? And he would allow me to look at his work and also, constructively criticize. So we really had a great team going. And when we knew that we were doing something that nobody had ever done, a musical like this. So we had no idea whether it would be booed off the stage or they liked it. We had no idea. So the first preview, Hal and myself and Ruth Mitchell, his longtime associate, were standing in Prince Edward theater in London, audience left aisle. And the house door to backstage was the audience right aisle. So when the bows came, Hal had just tacked something quickly together. We didn't really rehearse the bows. He just said, everybody turn around, because the whole company was on stage at the end. Everybody turn around, and principals run off stage, and everybody else just turn around and bow, and then one or two, you come on, you come on, you come on, you come on. And then everybody bow together, that's it. And so they did that. And the audience, when we started leaving the house to go through the stalls bar to come down the house right aisle to get backstage, and when we left the auditorium, the audience was sitting there kind of almost in rhythm, in a kind of hypnotic way, actually. And by the time we got through the stalls bar and started down the audience right aisle, suddenly the curtain, they started breaking rhythm, and they started cheering and carrying on. And the stage manager took the curtain back out, the show dropped back out, and they were all scurrying to get back on stage because they thought that was it. And they just carried on like mad. And Hal turned to Ruthie and me, I remember, and he said very calmly, well, I guess it works.
That's incredible.
I thought that was the best understatement of all.
I should say. Well, now, you know, speaking of Hal Prince, you did, you know, I had the great good fortune to be mentored by him, and I was his assistant on a show called Grind with Ben Vereen, and which is where you and I first met briefly in 1985. But I mean, you did 5 shows with Hal. I'd love to have you say more about that collaboration, because I mean, 5 amazing legendary shows, you know, Merrily We Roll Along, and some of the others we've been talking about. Other stories you could talk about your working relationship with Hal?
Sure. Well, Evita for one, I'll tell you that one. I can't remember whether this happened on the same trip to London or whether it happened on 2 different trips. But we would sit next to each other in the plane, of course, and we were both working on research and ideas and stuff. And like I was reading one of the biographies of Eva Peron, and I came to a list of men that she had known, that it was publicly known, had affairs with, and how they, as she went from man to man to man, they got more and more and more important and powerful. And so there was a number not too far into Act 1 called Good Night and Thank You, where her present lover would come through a door from her supposed boudoir, and she would, you know, kiss him or something, and they'd do a little bit of few lyrics, and then he'd be sent off. And well, he went to the side anyway, not off stage. And then the door would turn and she'd be inside her boudoir. Now I said to Hal, look, here's the list of guys. It's right here. It tells their names even. And why don't we use a revolving door so that she's inside and she's outside, so that the audience knows that she's in a different place when she's speaking about them instead of to them. And he said, oh, that's a great idea. So that's how the revolving door came. And again, on the plane, as I said, I don't know if it was the same trip, I heard him mumble to himself, musical chairs. No. And I said, what did you say, Hal? He said, musical chairs for Art of the Possible, you know, the General's thing. And I don't know if that'll, I said, Hal, that's a great idea. That's a terrific idea. They're like little boys playing musical chairs to see who gets taken out and who gets to go to the top. And I said, you've got to do it. So he did it with rocking chairs, which made it more musical. And he staged it, and then I kind of musicalized it a little. There was a place in the opening where the with the film, and everybody's sitting there just being told that she was dead. And they were all in frozen shock. And then there was this whole section of music where it was, you know, we were both going like, what the hell are we going to do here? I mean, there's all this music and there's not really much to do. And I said, oh, Hal, why don't we do a face in the crowd? You know, just pin the spot one of them and then put their photo up on the screen at the same time. Oh, great idea. So that's what we did. It was those kinds of feeds back and forth. And that went on a lot through the whole show.
That's great. And sounds like you were amazing at kind of bouncing off each other and
yeah, we were.
Ideas.
We were.
That's terrific. We've got a lot more to talk about, but there are a couple of special guests with us today who've worked with you before that I wanted to introduce. The wonderful Norman Large and Nancy Wood.
Oh my God, Norman!
Hey, Larry.
Larry.
Oh, not on. Yes, I am. Oh, hi. When I
Hello,
heard
baby.
When I heard you were going to be doing this, I said, oh, I am definitely coming in and saying hi, because we used to connect.
Glad.
I don't know where you are these days. I would love to reestablish contact.
I'm in my dining room in Palm Springs, actually Cathedral City. Where are you?
I'm in LA. I'm in Van Nuys. Yeah.
You've been there a long time?
Oh, yeah, over 20 years now. I came out with Phantom in '89, and that was a good long run between here and San Francisco. And I got married, had a house, had dogs. I had lost my apartment because it had been so long.
Yeah.
So I guess
did Silver Lake together at City Opera. Is that right? New York City Opera.
That started with Silver Lake, where I met Larry and Hal, and then Hal invited me to Broadway with A Doll's Life, which of course was also Larry.
Infamously a flop as opposed to a hit.
Well, that happens. Now, Nancy, what did you do with Larry?
Well, Larry, do you remember?
Hi, baby.
How are you? I was being interviewed by TJ. I was talking about how I was invited in, and Eddie Strauss played when you were doing On the 20th Century. I was doing a chorus line, and I auditioned for The Mistress in Boston, and then I ended up with my ex-husband Jonathan and doing Evita in London, and then was invited along with Pepe and John to go to New York. So it's so nice to see you. And
yes, I do remember now. I thought you had been a mistress, but I wasn't totally sure.
Yeah.
Now, but you're American, yes?
No, I'm American. I continued to live in London. I was there for 12 years, actually, and I went on to do, They're Playing Our Song. I did the original Starlight Express, and Are You Lonesome Tonight, and a few other projects. And then I came back to the States. But it was such a special time of my life to work with both you and Hal. And so it's just so wonderful to hear your stories, because I was there during the whole Patti LuPone, and Jonathan did the sound, and I knew about, Gary Posner was on a lot as the alternate, and so I was there. So it's so wonderful to go down this memory lane with you. So nice to see you. Thank you so much.
We too. Where are you now? Are you in LA as well?
No, I'm in Miami right now. I was planning to go to Georgia. I came down to take care of my dad, who has passed. And so now I'm sort of reinventing myself and starting again. I'd like to do more TV and film if I can. And the goal was to go to Georgia, but to Atlanta, but now everything's on hold. So that's my immediate goal. And maybe
so wonderful.
LA. So anyway.
Wonderful that you're both able to be here. And Larry, before we run out of time, I'd love to have you talk about Sweeney Todd. And I know you have some great stories about Angela Lansbury.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Onward. Thank you both so much for coming in on this. It was so nice.
You're welcome. Bye.
Yes. When I first saw the script of Sweeney Todd, Hugh Wheeler had rewritten the melodrama that had played in London off Broadway, in their version of off Broadway in the Fringe, and Stephen had seen it, and he optioned it to do a musical. And so he brought it to Hal, and Hal said, Larry, I had to do it because it was the first thing he ever brought to me that he wanted to do. I always brought things to him. So when he brought this to me, I had to say yes. And so Hugh Wheeler, who never got the kind of credit he deserved because he was such a good book writer. And then, of course, he would take it and turn it into a lot of musical numbers with not so much book left as far as dialogue. So the first time I saw the script was I was staying with Hal and Judy and hello, Marty, in Mallorca, at their summer place. So he gave me the script to read, and about maybe 1/4 or 1/3 of the first act had been musicalized at that point. The rest of it was a script. And so I said to Hal, well, yeah, this is really something. I mean, how are we going to do it? I mean, you think it should be kind of comic-ish mannequin body parts hanging from the ceiling and his downstairs where the furnace is and so on? Or do you want to do it for real? I mean, where's the line here? Grand Guignol or horror story or what? And he said, you know, I'm not sure yet, but we'll find it. And of course he did. And of course it was all his concepts. And when one weekend we were going to London for some work on Evita, and I think maybe from there we were going to go on over to Australia. So I had to travel about approximately at the same time. So Hal said, have you ever been to Ireland? And I said, no. And he said, you want to go to Dublin for the weekend before we go to London? And of course, Hal loves all of that kind of political mix-up and so on that you'd see a lot of in Ireland in the history. And so I said, sure, I want to go. So I got there first, and I was looking through a What to Do magazine in my hotel room. And when Hal got there, I said, look, here is the original prison that the revolutionaries, Michael, what's his face? I can't think of the last name right now. Led by Michael Meyer or something like that. The ones that took over the downtown post office and barricaded themselves in, and then they were captured and sent to this prison where they were also executed. And Hal said, oh yeah, we got to go see that. So we went, and you saw the actual stone, really like field stone cells they were kept in originally, and the courtyard where they were executed, and so on and so on. And then there was an added wing to the prison, which of course was now a museum, that had not been there when all that went on, that had been built on in the 20s or something. So the guide said, well, okay, so I want to show you this new wing. Well, we walked into this vast hall with a series of cells on the ground floor and a big iron stairway going up in two directions, one on to either side, with a big iron walkway and a second-story row of cells. And of all things, there was a milk glass panel roof on this whole huge room. And it was being used as I'm on it. The hell was that? It was being used as a exhibition room where they had cases of smaller things that you could see that had to do with that time in the prison. But the minute Hal walked into the room, he said, "This is it." And I said, "It is? What is it?" And he said, "It's the set for Sweeney Todd." And that's basically where that whole main framework of the set came from. That they sent him photographs and stuff. Eugene Lee, who was designing it, Hal had originally wanted a diorama where one side was open to the audience and then the rooftops of London went off upstage into the distance. And that's why he wanted the, what is now the Gershwin, I guess. It was the Eurus then, because it had the widest stage on Broadway. And then the chases in the second act were supposed to be over the top, the rooftops of London and so on. Well, Eugene had come to Hal shortly before this trip to Ireland and told him he couldn't do that set. It wouldn't work. And so Hal, instead of saying, "Well, then you're fired," said, "Okay, we'll figure something else out." So the prison in Dublin, that's where it came from.
Amazing.
And then Eugene went off and bought up an old iron forge or something place up in New York State and brought all this old rusty, antiquated equipment back down and placed it around the set. Anyway, the first day of rehearsal, I knew that I was going to have to do Worst Pies in London with Angela. Hal had warned me. So I had the stage manager have all these mock props because you couldn't do the number without the props. After we had the read through and sing through, the first thing, right after lunch, Hal said, "I'm going to have you take Angela into the lounge." We were rehearsing at the then Anta Theater. I can't remember what the hell it's called now. It's on 51st, 52nd Street. 52nd, I think, across from what is now the Simon Theater. Anyway, we were rehearsing there. And those were the days when you could actually rehearse in an empty theater. And there's a big lounge there, a really big one. And so they had the pie shop workspace bar set up for her, and we had all the props and flour, everything. Well, the number that Steve wrote, it's really like a straitjacket as far as staging, because the lyrics tell you exactly what she has to do, and in what order, of course. And so we started. She knew the words. You know, she's an actress that comes in prepared. She's probably the most prepared actor as far as star actor that I've ever worked with, and the nicest. God, she's a terrific lady. So anyway, we worked on it little by little. We'd go maybe an hour and a half or so, and then I'd see her eyes start to go kind of up in her head, and she'd get all blurry. And I'd say, "Okay, well, that's it for today." Because it's a hell of a number. I mean, you haven't got a second to think. It just has to come. And by the end of the week, we had it done. And she did the whole number, straight through, not one mistake, everything exactly right. And after she finished, I said, "Oh, Angela, you did it, you did it." And she said, "Yes, but you know, there were those 8 bars there where, well, don't worry, I'll fill that in later." And I thought, what the hell does she mean? She did everything absolutely right. And then I went, aha. I believe she meant there were 8 bars where I wasn't Mrs. Lovett. I was Angela Lansbury trying to figure out what the hell comes next. But that was the only thing. And we did the same thing with the opening of Act 2, God, That's Good, where she's serving pies to all these people sitting at a big long plank table, and the chair's arriving upstairs where Sweeney is, and he's calling to her to come up, and the customers are calling to her, and it's again one of those things. And in non sequiturs coming right and left. I mean, there's nothing to warn you that the next thought is, and it was so hard. So for her, so we did that the same way. We'd do it after lunch every day for about an hour and a half, and then we'd stop because I could see her going brain dead. It was just too much to keep working on it and working on it and working on it for the whole day. And of course, in a week or so, she had it down pat. Then we were in previews, and she had a number in the second act, the, so to speak, 11 o'clock number, which really wasn't written as an 11 o'clock number. It's called By the Sea, Mr. Todd. And Hal wanted her to stop the show, which I thought, what? I don't think so, not with that number. But it was a beautiful number, it just wasn't that. So it would work every day. I'd say, okay, Angela, we're going to move more. And next, well, we'll move less and sit next to him more. And it was just diddling with the staging because the arrangement wasn't changing. I mean, it wasn't something that got very exciting. It was just Mrs. Lovett making a little home for Sweeney and being ridiculous and girly. And so finally, one show, Angela called me backstage at intermission, and she said, Larry, I want you to ask Hal and Steve, and of course you, to come in tomorrow, just before everybody else gets here. Let's, like 30 minutes before anybody else is here. I want to try something with the end of Sweeney, of By the Sea. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you'll see it tomorrow. So I told them, and Hal and Steve, and Paul Giuliani, musical director, and so on, we all agreed to come in. So we got there half an hour early. Lynn was there, Lynn Carrier, because he was sitting through the whole number. We had this set out. She did the whole number exactly as staged until the very, very end, when there's a vamp goes, bum, ba-da-lump, 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 ba-da-la-da-la-da-lump, bum, bum. Well, what she did was, at the very end, during that vamp, she came downstage, did a cartwheel into a split, and put her arms over her head, and just smiled like a majorette. And the expression on Hal's and my and Steve's face is probably like that shot in The Producers. Our mouths dropped open and we were staring at, like, what did I just see?
That's an amazing story.
She sat in that split for a few seconds, and she looked at us, and she was getting up, and she said, well, I guess it didn't work. And smartest lady ever lived. Instead of arguing with Hal, she did something so outrageously ridiculous that he would either think it was wonderful, or he wouldn't say anything. And of course it was, I don't know what the audience would have done, but.
That's incredible. Larry, we could listen to you all afternoon. I'm sorry to say we're out of time. Maybe we could, we didn't get to Elizabeth Taylor or Michael Bennett or some of the other amazing people you worked with. So maybe
you gentlemen are welcome anytime to return. We would love those stories. Are you kidding? This is fantastic.